Let's get started with the investor hot seat. And our first speaker today is Josh Kincaid, Portfolio Risk Manager, C3 Fund, who will be presenting on the following topic: using automated algorithmic trading to invest in niche sectors like cannabis. Now, there's a lot to unpack there. Josh was a security risk analyst managing $650 million fund. He has a proven success record in finance, compliance, and operations within highly regulated industries. He's experienced the financial industry's stringent regulatory environment and has survived a myriad of regulatory changes in the cannabis industry. He constantly monitors potential changes that could impact the industry, utilizing an extensive contact base to leverage his clients' resources and maximize success. Josh has been connecting individuals and businesses since his internship at the World Trade Center. By the way, Josh, I'm glad you made it out of there. Over the last 6 years, Josh keeps a finger on the pulse of the industry, utilizing technology and data from Headset, New Frontier Data, and the Cannabis Alliance. He analyzes economic market reactions and synthesizes recommendations. In his spare time, he produces a cannabis business podcast called The Talking Head. Google it. This is an excellent podcast worth listening to if you are a serious player. Josh is an advisor and contract CFO for companies throughout North America. He holds a degree in international business management from Western Washington University and a master's of finance from the City University of Seattle. Mr. Josh Kincaid, please take it away.
All right. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Appreciate that, John. All right. Sharing my screen here. Wanted to just kind of start with this high-level overview of how we at C3 use automated algorithmic trading, or a robot trading, robo-advisor, if you will. So Warren Buffett's saying you cannot control your emotions if you can't control your money. We're going to kind of use that as a theme as we move forward. So at C3, we are an innovative fintech company that licenses an automated stock trading software to sophisticated investors and institutional advisors to invest in niche alternative sectors like cannabis or crypto. So we use artificial intelligence-based technical analysis and machine learning with predictive analytics to invest in niche sectors like cannabis, Chinese, semiconductors, and we've branched out to add crypto or IPOs or a custom index. So we've actually replicated the ARK fund, Kathy Woods' fund, and got 170% return over her 110%. Also doing crypto, we'll dive into that. So we can do the Bangladesh Stock Exchange, for example. They don't have fully automated, and so we're able to send them alerts for a human to then execute. So there's a lot of different functionalities that we have here at C3, a lot of things that you can do for automated algorithmic trading as well. So we're investing using what we call smart frequency trading, and that benefits our clients with capital preservation, risk management, and long-term growth. And we want to be the world's first AI-based cannabis exchange traded fund, or ETF. I'm going to get into performance and show you eventually kind of how we compare against PodX and MJ. But first off, just kind of giving this educational high-level overview of what it is first. Back to the problem statement. Too many investors are following their emotions. So a lot of people are struggling to separate their emotions from investment decisions and following a reactive cycle of excessive optimism and fear, which generally leads to really bad decisions at the worst possible time. So at C3, we don't trade based on emotions. We're ranking investment opportunities based on the probability of benefiting from current economic conditions, trends, events, and then identifying those particular stocks that have the greatest potential for appreciation. So the most successful moneymaker in finance history, a guy named Jim Simmons, and he has one simple rule of thumb for investing, which is remove all emotion. So he founded Jim, that is, he founded Renaissance Technologies way back in 1978 and got over $100 billion, with the majority of that coming from algorithmic trading. So that's the core part of what we're doing at C3, using similar tools to invest and manage risk while preserving capital. And as you can see, it's nothing new. Last year, over 65% of all trades were actually done from machines. So this started from Rohit Srivastava. He was our chief investment officer, portfolio manager. He locked himself away in 2015 and developed this algorithm, finally launched it in 2017 to track the S&P 500. And for the last 5 years, we have an average return of 43%, tracking that S&P with 7 figures in assets under management. So what is it? Smart frequency trading, if I can use Apple as an analogy, if you were to buy Apple in 2016 and hold it for the entire year, you would have gained 9.94%. But stocks are going up and down. They're volatile. They're crazy. If you've watched Bitcoin in the last 48 hours, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And we love that volatility. Why? Because we're not getting 9.94%. We're taking $2 here or $200 there, whatever. As we're timing that market, the peaks and troughs are what we're our bread and butter. We're getting 49% during that same period, taking advantage of that volatility. The predictive analytics is really kind of helping us get away from the emotions and more towards algorithmic trading, which is exactly what we want to do. So using an analogy of renting a house or buying a house, is basically looking at certain triggers, right? So maybe you need a bigger house or something for your kids, and there's also filters. So how many bedrooms are there? All of those things that you're going to be looking at, and it all boils down to risk. So you're going to have an inspection come out. You're going to look at the roof. You're going to have a appraiser come out. All of these things are creating new decisions for you, and you're learning from that. But our algorithm is doing the same thing, just at a much faster speed. So the triggers, the filters, the risk, all of these things, predictive analytics and risk management is making a lot of new decisions and learning from a lot of new experiences. So ultimately, you've got artificial intelligence and machine learning creating faster decisions and more opportunities for you. So what is it doing? Basically, what we do is we take a SQL upload with key definitions, executing our various triggers. And although it's technical analysis, it's taking fundamentals. So that Jazz Pharmaceutical buyout of GW Pharma or the Tilray merger, we picked up all of that and you know made a significant gain. Executing through either E-Trade, TD Ameritrade, Interactive Brokers, or a proprietary system that our clients have, anything that has an API connection or gateway, we can connect to. On crypto, that's Gemini, Coinbase, eToro, things like that. They can automatically connect and start trading. So our secret sauce is smart frequency trading. Again, this is analyzing multiple data points for potential trades using this automated algorithmic trading function. So smart frequency trading is benefit our clients with long-term growth, as well as this capital preservation, utilizing risk management to generate above market returns. And it does this with a combination of technical, quantitative, and cognitive analysis, along with predictive analytics, which helps with crazy markets like crypto. So we asked a month in advance. Our predictive analytics kind of popped up, and we said a month before the election, are cannabis stocks poised for a breakout? And they were. They went crazy between October and January, saw a massive amount of speculation as everyone was kind of anticipating federal legalization. We've seen a lot of correction since January, but we were able to see that in advance. Looking at some of our predictive analytics, the red dots on here are showing you when we wanted to get out of the market. Looking at 2018, you can see in the middle of the screen in October, getting out before the market fell off 14% in October of 2018. Last year, We avoided that whole market fall off of 37%. It does this by running through over 800 equities on the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ, and then analyzing a combination of 80 indicators to identify points when the market might be ready to sell off, and likewise when a good time to get into the market might be. So some of the performance, like I mentioned, we do track for cannabis. We're looking at ETFMG, ticker symbol MJ, and then the Global PODX ETF. They had a -54, -56% respectively, compared to our positive 93%. So outperforming them by 147 and 149%, simply by really not using emotions. So year to date with crypto, as of 4/20, we were up 426% on crypto. Again, we got out of the majority of our trades before that collapse just 72 hours ago. So haven't had time to analyze where we got in, although that's what I'm going to be spending my afternoon, because I'm interested for obvious reasons. So there is a lot of FOMO, whether it's cannabis or crypto. Excited to see if Mexico or Israel becomes a third and fourth country to legalize after Uruguay and Canada. Obviously, the U.S. is going to be doing that at some point. So we are seeing some increasing speculation into the industry, especially after the election. Again, when we saw South Dakota and New Jersey and Arizona and Montana legalize, a lot of cash flow came into the cannabis space, anticipating immediate gratification, and that ROI didn't happen. So there was quite a significant Fibonacci retracement since February, around 2/3, 60-something%. So that does lead for some opportunities down the road, but you gotta diversify. So trading diversification for capital preservation and market risk management. We try to buffer some of our cannabis stocks with ESG or environmental social governance stocks to pad some of that volatility. Some other ways that we manage some of our risk, depending on the type of risk. There's systemic risk and then non-systemic risk. So systemic risk is a loss to the entire market, and there isn't anything you can really do, might not even trigger a trailing stop loss, and it impacts everything, versus non-systemic, which is very isolated to either an individual security or sector, and there is generally something you can do about that. There are trading risks, whether that's emotional trading or tax issues. There's ways to mitigate all of those types of risks. So we mitigate our systemic risk with market downturn indicators that I showed you, and then non-systemic risk by diversification. We also have trading risks that we have AI making unemotional decisions, and is also pretty decent at tax as well. So again, we have market downturn indicators as well as diversification, and AI has got our back constantly. So that's basically our smart frequency trading in a nutshell. Shameless plug on some of the nominations we've gotten the last couple of quarters for best crypto and trading platform, best AI platform, and be more than happy to talk about that. Obviously, it's not FDIC insured or bank guaranteed and may lose value. And if there's any questions, you guys can get a hold of me at josh@c3fund.com. And if there's any questions, if not, I appreciate the time, John.
It's like John lost his sound. Manic, are you there?
Josh, can you guys hear me?
Daniel?
Yeah, quite impressive numbers. I was a retail broker for 23 years, sold my practice 3 years ago. Obviously, this has been a great asset allocation for clients. How do you see it fitting in to just an overall asset allocation, you know, your traditional 60-40 asset allocation with brokers?
Brokers are some of our favorite clients, as a matter of fact. So regardless of what their strategy is or focus, it's a tool that we can help them either with fully automation or with, like I mentioned, just alerts. So regardless of sector, I think it's a tool that a lot of people should be utilizing in addition to other technical indicators. Ichimoku is another one. Elliott Wave, if you believe in that. So yeah, they'd be more than happy to talk to you more about it offline, but I think there should be more fund managers and asset managers utilizing technical indicators that we have at C3.
Absolutely. I'm sure I have a ton of questions. I could definitely ask you offline for sure.
Yeah, either way.
Mhm.
Appreciate it, Daniel. Thank you.
But
I have a
Josh,
quick question, Clifford Perry.
Hi, Cliff.
Hi, I know, or I believe that we will all have access to this recording in full. Is that right, Brad, or no?
Yes.
Okay, and Josh, if I were interested in having, I have your email, but if I'm interested in having access to your PowerPoint, is that proprietary? Do you require an NDA or?
I do not require an NDA. I do the opposite, and I will give you a finder's fee.
Okay, I'm very, very interested in putting you together with another engineer that has a platform similar where I believe there's tremendous synergy here.
Beautiful. Thank you, Cliff.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I have a question for you, Josh. You know that there's 5 traditional measures of risk in a portfolio: alpha, beta, R squared, SD, and of course, Sharpe ratio. How have you assessed the risk of your program, and how do you compare?
We take all of those into consideration, Sharpe ratio especially, and our emulated results, we backtest everything, and they're pretty on point within a % or 2 from actual results. So crypto, our emulated results for last year, 420%, were emulated in actual results year to date, 420%. So in terms of the technical risk analysis, you know, going back to 2009, 2008, I think are big for when we develop a fund. That's what we look at, is we're looking at certain crashes and certain black swan events and market risk. And so I feel like we're pretty on point. We're looking at that all of the time. So to your point, I think there's going to be a certain area in time where we need to look at that as this longest bull market in history comes to an end. There will be a crash, and tools like this to kind of prepare yourself on when the timing might occur is going to be something that many people need and will look at in the future after they realize they don't have that kind of security. So I feel like we're already prepared, and hopefully we'll be able to prep other people with these kind of tools.
Okay, I'm going to wrap it up soon with a quick question. How long is your data set?
It depends on the fund. I mean, we've been in business for over 5 years running the algorithm across half dozen fund families. So, you know, if you want data sets on crypto, we've got a couple of years back tested, or something that we've been running consistently for 5 years. So, plenty of info to run through with you if you want to see it.
I do, and we'll discuss that offline, but quickly, I just want to say that for those people that are interested in investing in cryptos in particular, I think that what you have to offer is really interesting. I mean, Bitcoin is 11 years, so I mean, how much history you really have, but you certainly need to take the emotion out of that particular sector. So I think you're onto something very interesting, and I wish you the best of luck.
Appreciate it. It wasn't easy for crypto either. To try to tie all in to get all of those coins and everything and then automate it was a massive task. And I think we're one of the only people doing it with automated algorithmic trading. So it's been a challenge, but it's never stopped us before.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it's such a fascinating presentation. I could go on, but I
There's
have
a
to
lot
move
more.
on.
I'm interested to see what other people have. So if there's no more questions, let's get this rolling, because I'm
yeah,
excited.
one more question, John. I looked at my my Gemini account yesterday. Obviously, was very sad. and my PayPal too. So I don't have a Coinbase, but how did your fund react to that massive sell-off, primarily due to the big mouth of our Tesla friend?
Yeah, love Elon Musk, that guy. I've got a short position on Tesla, and it's not doing too well. But yeah, I'm just saying that anyways. The robot got out before the crash, so I haven't seen what its entry points were yet, Daniel, but I will definitely follow up with you. I'm excited to see what our entry is today. I think we're up at least 10%, in the last 12 hours.
Same here.
But we avoided that whole market fall off.
Okay, that was my question. Wow. Okay. Awesome.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you very much, Josh Kincaid, for an absolutely fascinating presentation. And I encourage people out there to find out more about what he's doing, especially if you're planning on investing in cryptos in a serious way. So moving on, our second speaker today is Dr. Sandra Carrillo. Her topic is medical cannabis, a physician's perspective. And before I proceed, I'd like to preface by declaring that Dr. Sandra Carrillo is my spouse, invited by Brad Turner to appear. I have conducted hundreds of interviews and presentations, but interviewing my wife is a first even for me. As one of my good friends stated, you're one of the bravest men I know. Dr. Sandra Carrillo earned her medical doctorate degree from the University CES in Medellin, Colombia. She holds a master's degree in aesthetic medicine from Baleares Island University in Spain, and completed a master's program of anti-aging and aesthetic medicine in Argentina, certified by the International Anti-Aging Society. Dr. Carrillo further holds a master's in health services management, Universidad Latina in Panama, which is essentially a specialized MBA. She is certified by the Pharmacology University and deemed an expert doctor in cannabis medicine, University of Puerto Rico. She completed the University of Toronto Faculty of Medicine, CC.net cannabis training program for MDs twice, and I could spend the next 15 minutes describing her other qualifications. Dr. Sandra Carrillo is professor in charge of the Cannabis Research and Education Initiative, Faculty of Medicine, University of Panama. She is the president of the Colombian Medical Association of Cannabis Practitioners. And further, she is co-founder of Medican IPS, the second largest group of medical cannabis clinics and practitioners in Colombia, with 7 locations in Canada. Sandra has spoken at over 50 events on 5 continents, including Canatech Panama, Digital Hollywood USA, Hemp and CBD Expo UK. She's appeared in Malta, Portugal, Colombia, Mexico, Brazil, Jamaica, Thailand, etc., etc. She's regularly invited to speak at specialized scientific conferences on a continuous basis, usually MD, PhD type events. I've listened in on a few of them, and I'm lost after the first 15. Moreover, Sandra has appeared on dozens of television and radio programs and makes regular podcast appearances. Sandra has guest lectured at the CES Medical School in Colombia, University of Sao Paulo, Brazil, and the University of Mexico, Mexico City, where she holds an honorary professorship. She was an expert witness presenting several oral and written submissions before the Government Health Committee responsible for drafting legislation to legalize cannabis for medical use in Canada. Her interests are primarily in research and education. She is a member of the ICRS, which is the International Cannabinoid Research Society, member of the SCC, Society of Cannabis Clinicians, board member of ACS, Association of Cannabis Specialists in the USA, and member of the IACM, International Association for Cannabinoid Medicine. And finally, her proudest achievements, Sandra is a co-founder of the Panama Food Bank and a volunteer at the Children's Epilepsy Foundation in Panama. Dr. Sandra Carrillo, welcome to the Investor Hot Seat.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you to Brad for inviting me. And it's an honor for me to be here and being interviewed by John. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity since education for me is a very important subject. And I also consider that the industry and the doctors and healthcare practitioners, we are part of an ecosystem. So we need a healthy industry as doctors to be able to have very good quality products and medicines for our patients. So these events are very important because we need to have a healthy industry in order to be able to create good medications for the patients and products that are safe for the patient's consumption.
There we are. It was working. And so let's start with the following questions. How did you get into medical cannabis? What made you decide to include medical cannabis in your clinical practice?
That's a very good question, a very important one, because this is like the who marks the before and the after in my clinical practice. Before, I was, I wouldn't say a traditional doctor because medical cannabis is not untraditional medicine. It's just medicine that is being used for thousands of years. But before I was working more on ER and doing more consultation, prescribing medications that usually all doctors prescribe. But since I am a volunteer of children's epilepsy in Panama, I started seeing mothers having to fly to other countries to get medications, particularly CBD, to treat their children epilepsy. We have to remember that these years, the internet, everybody has access to internet. So since in Panama, medical cannabis is not legal, I was seeing all these mothers flying to the United States, to Colombia, to different countries to find treatment for these patients, and in this specific case, children. And I saw how these patients were improving. So that made me think about maybe that was an alternative. And then I flew to Canada, and that was where I did my first training. And when I saw this room full of doctors, like it was like around 300 doctors talking about medical cannabis, scientific evidence, endocannabinoid system. So that was my first approach years ago. And since then, I changed my approach to my patients, because I see now a patient more than a symptom, more than a disease. Is like a whole integrative approach the medical cannabis allowed me to do. And it's a more personalized medicine, which I feel very grateful to practice. Before, medicine has been automatized. The doctor is being required to see a number of patients every hour. So that don't allow the doctor to develop a good relationship with the patient. For the doctors that are practicing or prescribing medical cannabis, I think they will agree with me that we take the time to understand a lot of subjects regarding to the lifestyle of the patient, the quality of life. So I think medical cannabis allowed me to practice a more empathic medicine, more personalized medicine. So I feel very grateful, because since medical cannabis came into a clinical practice, I've been seeing the patients with a different perspective, more holistic and more personalized, which is very important, and the patients really appreciate all this time. So that's the way I started.
Great. Why shouldn't I just visit my local legal dispensary and buy directly from a bud tender? Why should I see an MD, ND, DO, or any other healthcare professional?
Well, that's an amazing question too, and you just say it because in the case of a doctor studied medicine, knows the body, knows the drug-drug interactions, knows the side effects, knows how to catalog a pathology, and knows how to customize or prescribe the proper treatment for the patient. And that also includes what is the follow-up of the patients. And this is very important because the doctor, first of all, when the patient comes to the visit to the clinic, the doctor has to do a very deep clinical history and put it on the records. And then, of course, the physical examination. So there is a lot of things that a doctor has to do before deciding to prescribe or recommend medical cannabis. So I think there is a big difference, and it also depends in which country are you living. Particularly in Colombia, we don't have bud tenders. We just have the doctors, and medical cannabis is prescribed just by doctors. So it's very important for me, and I always say this to patients, don't self-medicate, because cannabis medicine is a very noble medicine, but as other medicine has some drug-drug interactions and some side effects. They are, of course, not lethal, but it's very important to have consideration. And the most important thing that I will always highlight is the drug-drug interactions. For a bud tender, it will be very hard to know the drug-drug interactions. So I think, of course, according to the country the person is living, I will always advise to visit the doctor first, because there is many things that had to be taken in consideration, and also to recommend the product that is safe and that is accurate for the patient's ailment.
Thank you. Based on your experience with patients, does access to medical cannabis improve lives?
Definitely, yes. That's 100% yes. And that is the part that I like most about medical cannabis or cannabinoid medicine, because I had the opportunity to see, and as I mentioned at the very beginning, we are not treating a symptom, we are not treating a pathology, we are treating a whole person from an integrative approach. So quality of life is something very important that we see improving in patients, in particular pathologies. I can mention just refractory epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, chronic pain, like being neuropathic pain, arthritis, fibromyalgia, or oncological pain, being different types of cancers that can produce pain. So we see how medical cannabis help these patients. Also talking about the nausea and vomiting induced by chemotherapy in patients. Definitely all these patients and multiple studies, randomized control trials, some of these studies, they have a scale and they are rating quality of life. And one of the major percentages that we see improvement is in quality of life. We have to remember the quality of life is if there is an oncologic patient with a terminal cancer, medical cannabis will help to improve the appetite, also will improve the sleeping quality, also will help the patients to feel more relaxed and deal with anxiety and depression. So even epilepsy, the children that are being treated with cannabidiol, you see a reduction also on of course, on the crisis, but you also see a very big impact on the family, not just on the patient, on the family, because if it's a child that is reduced 40 or 50% the seizure, this is a mother that will be able to go to work work, or and this is a family that will have more time to do other things together. So I think medical cannabis impacts the quality of life, not just of the patients, also of the family. So that's why I think cannabinoid medicine, I said, is the medicine of the future, but it's already the medicine of the present and was the medicine of the past. So I think that the doctor should be more open to this alternative and should be in the toolbox of each physician or healthcare practitioner.
Well said. I mean, it's just, maybe I have a conflict of interest there, but it amazed me. Nevertheless, it's very well said. What can people expect when they visit a cannabis doctor? What's the process like? Now, you have touched upon this already, but perhaps you could amplify a little bit.
Yes, well, particularly in Colombia, that we have our clinics, it's a very simple process. Of course, the appointment, the patient comes to the consultation, the doctor does a clinical history record with a questionnaire or different history records that the patient can have. Then the physical examination, and sometimes as doctors, we like to have some preliminary blood tests. In another cases, in the same consultation, the doctor prescribes. In Colombia, particularly, doctors are allowed to prescribe medical cannabis. So what I do and what we do in our clinics is we prescribe the medical cannabis in a form of magistral formulation. That is what is legal right now in Colombia. And the patient will receive the medication 3 to 5 days later. After that, particularly in my case, in our clinics, we do for the first month a follow-up on the patients every 3 days. We talk to the patient, the doctor, the nurses to see how is the patient evolving, because it's the process of titration. And then after a month or after the patient achieves control of the symptoms, then you start seeing the patient every month, every 2 months, or every 3 months, according to the pathology or the necessity of the patient. But it is a very simple process, and thanks God in Colombia we have this advantage that we have medicines available right now for patients.
Yeah, very true. A lot of places may have medical cannabis legalized, but probably actually accessing, like England, for example. But anyways, I won't go on about that. I understand the medical cannabis can be administered in several forms. Please describe.
Yeah, well, that's a very important part, because according to the country, you have different presentations. Globally, we know that the presentations where medical cannabis can be used is inhaled, of course, through vaporizators, that they are actually very good technology out there, and is the one that the patient will obtain the fastest effect, or the fastest relief, or the fastest onset of the treatment. Of course, I don't recommend the smoke part, because either way, the fact to be burning the cigarettes produce toluene, benzene, and different chemicals that can irritate the lungs. Another presentation is the oral presentations. We have tinctures, oils, capsules, sprays. So it's incredible what we have right now. And they are developing very interesting technologies, because we know that the oral presentations have a challenge, because the absorption is very little versus the inhaled administration. So with the oral presentations, I have seen very interesting things happening with nanotechnology, nano emulsifications, and different technologies that they're using to make oral medical cannabis having a better bioavailability and better absorption. And they are developing suppositoriums, patches, and of course, the cosmetic line for doing treatments on the skin, and they're always using also technology for transdermal patches. So this is a very wide variety right now that we have. And then the edibles that they are like the gummies and these other infused beverages that are not that much part of what us as doctors we use. So we use more in Colombia right now, we are just allowed to prescribe the oral medications. So as I said, we have tinctures, oil sprays in magistral formulations. But so far in other countries, they have the inhaled way available. So those two are very important. Also, they have been some good results reported with the use of suppositoriums. And in the cosmetic line, of course, the development of different types of cosmetic, which is very exciting too.
Yeah. Someday you'll have to tell people with a cosmetic line you developed for a very, very famous Hollywood couple. Anyways, let's move on. Tell us on an anonymous basis about a typical cannabis patient, one that you've treated. Just give us like a quick case study.
Well, in our clinics, we see a lot of patients with chronic pain. This is huge because, as I mentioned, chronic pain is a big word, but we have to define what type of chronic pain. As I say, fibromyalgia, arthritis, neuropathic pain, oncological pain. But usually I have patients with fibromyalgia, a good amount that they respond very well. There were patients that they've been treated with a lot of different medications and even having all the side effects of these medications, particularly in this case, I'm talking about a female, 50 years old, that has been suffering of fibromyalgia all her life and being treated with tons of medications. And we know, and we have evidence, actually, Dr. Ethan Russo wrote a very interesting paper talking about the deficiency of the endocannabinoid system. So in these patients with fibromyalgia and chronic syndromes like fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome, and migraines that are actually usually presented in patients with fibromyalgia, they found that these patients have problem with the endocannabinoid system. The tone sometimes are the enzymes that degrade the endocannabinoids, sometimes are the production of endocannabinoids, sometimes are problems with the receptors. So this is a very interesting theory. And in a patient, for example, with fibromyalgia, they respond very well to medical cannabis treatment, impacting their lives, particular lives of this patient. She couldn't sleep. She was all the time anxious and depressed, and she was all the day long suffering pain. And then by reducing the pain of a patient, that the scale was with the 1 to 10, 10. And then after a month, the patient reduced the scale from 1 to 10 to 2 or 3. This is, those are very big numbers because patients like this, then they sleep better, they eat better, and they have a better quality of life. So this is like a small example in here. And right now, where we have more scientific evidence in treatments with medical cannabis is refractory epilepsy, particularly Lennox-Gastaut, Dravet syndrome, and recently was approved for tuberous sclerosis, all the epileptic syndromes. And also for multiple sclerosis, particularly spasticity, also we have good evidence for the treatment with medical cannabis of patients with nausea and vomiting induced for chemotherapy. And the last will be chronic pain that I already described. So definitely we have a lot of patients with chronic pain being improving their lives by using medical cannabis. And I'm sure that we will see a lot of research being released very soon, and almost since last 5 years, I've been seeing a very important amount of research being released. So this makes me very optimistic because we know that we will have more evidence in the future for other pathologies that I think a lot of scientists and researchers are looking at for many years. And since the UN removed medical cannabis from Schedule 4, this is a way that the governments and countries can see that should relax a little bit the regulations they have for research so that will allow more doctors to do more research. So I think the future is very bright for medical cannabis. I am very optimistic and I see a lot of applications, but I also see that we need to do more education because medical cannabis can be more popular among doctors and healthcare practitioners if we keep educating doctors in a formal way.
That's great. Thank you. I'm going to have to wrap it up fairly soon, but there is one question I do have that I feel I have to ask, and that is, what problems do you see with medical cannabis? What are some of the side effects?
Very important. Particularly medical cannabis, you have to, as a doctor, we have to be careful with risk populations. There's populations that present high risk. For example, patients with unstable cardiac and pulmonary disease, also adolescents, and also pregnant women or during breastfeeding. And one of the most important ones is patients with clinical history of psychosis or schizophrenia. And also patients that they have a history record of substances or drug abuse. So those are risk populations that the doctor needs to assess what are the risk versus the benefits in these patients. Definitely, I will say that one of the biggest contraindications will be THC for patients with schizophrenia, because there's actually some studies right now with CBD, cannabidiol, for treating these patients, but THC avoided with patients with schizophrenia or psychosis. And what I was talking earlier about the drug-drug interactions, we have to think, and as doctors and scientists, we know there is a lot of interactions with other drugs, with other medicines that usually the patients are taking, for example, warfarin, some benzodiazepines. So it's not that there is a contraindication to use them, is that if the doctor is aware that the patient is taking these medications, there is actually a website where they have a very long list of these drug-drug interactions. So we actually have it available for our doctors because it's impossible to memorize 50 or 100 medicines that could have interactions, because we know CBD acts in different levels of receptors, not just CB1 and CB2, acts on TRVP, or acts on 5-HTA, so many receptors that we have to account that other drugs or medications are using too, and also that they are all metabolized through the CYPs, the cytochrome enzymes.
Sandra, I'm sorry, sweetheart. We gotta wrap this up, okay? We're running over. So, thank you, Dr. Carrillo. I'll be home for dinner at 6. So moving on,
Thank you so
Dr.
much.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure. So moving on, our third speaker is Dr. Dave, one of my favorites. His topic, different investment opportunities in the cannabis sector. David M. Kunick, PhD, actually double PhD, is an entrepreneur who specializes in investor advisory services. Dr. Dave, as most people know him, has raised capital, expanded several companies, and has employed over 300 plus people. He's been in the medical field for over 18 plus years, has been a business owner for 19 plus years, and has been in the cannabis industry for 10 plus years. Some people call him the triple-headed dragon due to his diversity and experience. Over the past 16 years, Dr. Dave has started over 10 plus companies, both in the public and private sector, and has successfully sold many of them. His efforts in business operations and human resources won him the prestigious Alfred Sloan Award for workplace programs and flexibility. That's a big deal, by the way. David has assisted many companies in securing millions of dollars for his clients, ranging from the cannabis, hemp, energy, medical, water, and beverage industry. He has served on numerous boards as an advisor and is a trusted source of information. Dr. Dave is frequently invited to keynote and speak at conferences on a variety of topics. So, Dr. Dave, please take it away.
Thank you so much, John. I really do appreciate the introduction. And for everyone that's here on the panel, thank you for spending your time. And from one former investor judge to the current investor judges, I wish everyone the best of luck today. And I hope it's a great event for everyone. What we're going to start off with today is actually a quick 2-minute video. And I'd recommend for this 2-minute video that's going to be played in a second, that if you could, turn up the volume on your computer, your laptop, your cell phone. If you have an issue hearing the video, I'll put my email address in the chat room. You can email us directly and we'll send you that video. But after we start off with this, we'll continue on with the presentation. So Brad and Ron, if you could cue the video, that'd be great.
Hello. If you're watching this video, you must have already reached out about the exciting opportunity currently being offered by UCS Advisors to both accredited and non-accredited investors. If you're wondering if these opportunities apply to you, ask yourself, are you someone who likes to diversify your investments? Are you currently in law enforcement, military, or a government-regulated job that decides for you that you cannot invest in the hemp and cannabis stocks while the rest of Wall Street sees exponential gains in these fields and new and exciting industries? Are you tired of not having the capital to invest in larger deals that seem only available to the financially elite, accredited investors, or large firms? Well, then UCS Advisors is your answer. We have been watching, listening, and providing guidance to all types of people from all walks of life for over a decade. Whether you're a policeman, a fireman, a carpenter, our business is making sure that your business succeeds. UCS Advisors does this by giving you the personal empowerment to be flexible in your investments. It gives you the personal empowerment to be diverse in your investment, and the personal empowerment to be in the know, to know when your money will mature, know exactly what time frame the money will mature, and know exactly the amount of money so that you can plan and make decisions for your future. Many people in the financial world only see the tip of the iceberg. UCS Advisors sees the entire iceberg, what is below the surface, out of public eye, and forged through a decade of interpersonal relationships and business integrity. Over 100 companies from all walks of life, publicly and privately, investments starting as low as $5,000 and becoming fully matured in as little as 15 months, a 30% return on investment. For example, if you invest $10,000 today, you will get back $13,000 in 15 months or less. It's that simple. We place your money where we think it will grow, and we pay you a flat 30% profit, similar to a corporate bond or a small business-to-business loan. 30% return, no more or no less, in 15 months or less. Contact UCS Advisors today and take advantage of this amazing opportunity. Dr. David Kunick, the co-founder and CEO, he can be reached directly at 201-252-7170 or visit us on the web at ucsadvisor.com.
Yeah, sorry about the delay, everyone. So that is our general video that we put out. And today we're going to talk about why this program came about. And let's go over some facts right now. Fact: if you work for certain government agencies, you are not allowed to invest in cannabis or hemp, such as the U.S. Marshals, such as if you work for the federal prison system. Fact: if you are an active military member, you are not allowed to invest directly into a cannabis deal. Fact: some states actually ban state-employed first responders, such as EMTs and firefighters, from investing directly into cannabis opportunities. Fact: if you are not an accredited investor, there are numerous, I repeat, there are numerous opportunities you are not allowed to invest in for cannabis. Fact: depending on your background check, if you want to invest in a private deal, you may not qualify to invest in a cannabis deal. And I'm going to take that point one step further. In several states, actually numerous states, if you get a drunk driving charge, that goes on your criminal record. And some states will not allow you to even apply for a cannabis license or to invest in a cannabis deal with that being on your record. Fact: the average cannabis owner, from concept of business idea to fully opening your business and generating a revenue, takes on average 2.78 years. Why do I bring that up? Is you always want to make sure you make your money work for yourself. Now, with these facts I just mentioned, and also being in cannabis now for almost 12 years, the investing landscape has dramatically changed. It's an estimated 86.5% of Americans no longer qualify here in 2021 to invest in cannabis. And that's not fair, and that's not right. And if you're paying attention to this presentation right now, if you've heard the comedian Chris Rock, go in the chat room right now and say, I know who Chris Rock is. So if you're listening right now and paying attention to this presentation, and you know who the comedian Chris Rock is, just put a yes or say, I know who Chris Rock is. And why do I say that? Because Chris Rock, back in 2003, while doing one of his comedy shows, he said, that ain't right. And once again, that ain't right. So if you are a non-accredited investor, you can't invest in a lot of deals. That ain't right. If you work for the federal prison system or a U.S. Marshal, you can't invest in cannabis. That ain't right. Now, if we take another step further, if you look at the average cannabis deal, especially in the private sector right now, you're looking at a minimum of usually $75,000 to invest in. Not everyone has $75,000. And when you really look at how many people, especially here in America, have extra income to invest in private deals, they don't have the extra money, and that ain't right. Now, let's take it another step further. The other reason why we came up with this program was a time frame. Stock markets go up and down. We'll see here, you might have issues with getting your money back on a private deal. We have organized this program where our return on investment and an opportunity for this is within 15 months or less. Why do I bring this up? Is that the average private deal to get back your initial investment is roughly 3 years. That's right, 3 years. Not everyone can invest $75,000 and wait 3 years. And as Chris Rock says, that ain't right. And I see people blowing up the chat room down there saying they know who Chris Rock is, and I know I have your attention. Why was this program created? It was created out of demand, and also it was created due to accountability. No blaming the presidents, no blaming the stock markets, no blaming the economy, no blaming the lack of gas. We designed this program because us here at UCS Advisors assume 100% of the risk. for your 30% return on investments. No blaming excuses. If we fall short of our number, that money's coming out of our own pocket, plain and simple. The other reason why we also came up with this is that at the same exact time is that, to be quite frank, if you're going to give your money $100,000, you're going to do a ton of due diligence. And by the time you're done with your due diligence, that opportunity might be lost. And I've seen John shake his head several times during this presentation because he knows exactly what I'm referring to. Another reason why we came up with this program and we made our minimum investment $5,000 is, let's call a spade a spade. If you talk to your financial advisor, if you're a financial advisor here in the chat on this, give me, I'm a financial advisor, because you're going to tell your clients, take 5% of your portfolio and put in something risky. Well, you got a $100,000 portfolio, 5%, that's $5,000. But once again, we created this program mainly due to two reasons. One, accountability. We were tired of everyone, when investments didn't come through, blaming the stock market or blaming COVID or blaming who the president was. We're tired of excuses. If you're a business owner, take accountability. And that's what we do here at UCS Advisors. The next reason is that if we were looking at the cannabis industry over a decade ago, pretty much anyone and everyone could invest in it. That's not the case anymore. And it's not fair. And in the words of Chris Rock, that ain't right. And it's just not right that so many people cannot invest in cannabis. And the other thing is too, last but not least, is we tell people, dip your toe in the water, invest 5, 10, or 15,000. See if our program is the right fit for you. And then if it is, then you might like some of the other deals. Listen, if you want to put 100 grand into a great deal, we have options for you. Josh Kincaid, I think, is speaking later today. C3 Fund, great company. They do great work. You've had other people here, such as Iconic Wellness, who's presented here, Investor Hot Seat, who does deals out in Michigan with Dispensary Go. They're doing great work as well, too. We have those deals that we can vet it, but if you don't feel comfortable or if you don't qualify for these better deals, reach out to us and we can educate you, we can empower you. And with that being said, because I know, John, we're going to have a little open forum for a couple minutes and talk. The main part of this program, and you can hear the passion in my voice, is that I've started 7 different cannabis companies in 5 different states. And it truly is amazing how over 85% of Americans no longer qualify to invest in cannabis deals. And that ain't right. And we are here to solve that problem. And we are here to help people with that. With that being said, John, I'd love to start a dialogue or any questions.
Wow. I don't know how many people really understand what it is that you're actually offering. I am an accredited investor, and I also have a family office that meets certain definitions. It basically allows me to invest in pretty well anything, right? But what does that really mean? That means that those deals that people always wonder, how do I get into that? Why did this company, before it went public, how can I get into the pre-public stock? How can I get into the private investment rounds? And the answer, of course, is most of them you can't because you're not an accredited investor. And that's what you're addressing with, in some ways, which is a market inefficiency. I mean, I understand the logic behind it originally was that, if you have a certain amount of money, in theory, you're a sophisticated investor. Supposedly, you know what you're doing. Well, that may be true, but the truth is it's created an unfair advantage for guys like me that just basically can get into that earlier deals. So I'm going to go ahead, and with that having been said, I'm going to throw the following question out. And I think this is an important one, David, is what has changed in terms of the definition of an accredited investor? And more importantly, what does that mean to me?
So, John, this is a great question. And this is another reason why we came up with this program, because we saw how the term accredited investor was traditionally all about finances. And then they've slightly changed the definition where, depending your experience of being maybe a financial advisor, a financial planner, depending what certifications you hold, depending even your real life experience, if you've been on boards of publicly traded companies and what your experience has been in the money markets, you can now qualify as an accredited investor. The term's getting looser and looser now. And what we usually tell people is this: at the end of the day, if you're not an accredited investor and you invest in a deal and you lose all your money, you have nothing to stand on. You can't sue the company. Nothing's going to happen. That's really the short end of it. You have nothing to do. And a lot of these better deals, you know what? They don't want to take that risk and they don't want that headache. So, and what's interesting is, and I'm going to take a step further, John, and there's another reason why we developed this 30% return on investment program. We've been blessed. I've been blessed. I'll be first to admit to it. I've been in the industry long enough, as well as some of our team members, where we've got in on friends and family rounds. For some companies that are now in their Series B, Series C, or even Series D round, because we had that time, because we qualified. But we made sure that we empowered ourselves the opportunity to increase our positions through us. And that's why we offer a flat rate fee for our return on investment, because we have deals in place in the private sector, in the public sector. We have deals with small dispensaries and also small grow operators. We get a royalty for every ounce grown, or we get a percentage of the profit to hit X amount of dollars selling product out of their dispensary per month. Not everyone can get part of these deals. So we're taking that entire group of deals, putting them all together, knowing what we could offer for that return on investment for someone who might not quite qualify for that accredited investor, or they might just be a year or two away. And now they can start to dip their toes in the water and start to get involved in this cannabis industry.
That's a very important point, especially since you can do a level of due diligence that far, very relatively few investors, I even include myself in that category, can actually do. Because for me, if I'm doing a private placement, it's a small deal. I frankly just don't have the time. But
And John, let's take it a step further, actually. In 2020, we reviewed over 450 pitch decks.
Oh, there you
Only
are.
16 of them passed our vetting process.
Yeah.
Our investors are very happy with those 16. 2019, we did 325 plus, only 12. And I see Josh Kincaid shaking his head because we've talked about this offline, is that, you know what, when you're doing and you're working with someone, they're doing the due diligence for you. And that's why we laugh with working with financial advisors, because people in Boston, LA, Denver, those financial advisors saying, okay, we want you to help our clients because you make the money. They're going to take that profit, give it back to us, and let us reinvest it for them.
Yeah, no, and also not that I hope it's not lost on anyone. From what I discern, you have deal flow, which is really important, because even someone like myself, I have access to, I belong to numerous groups and numerous firms, but there's still deals that I either can't get into, or I'm not qualified. I'm not saying qualified. I just can't get in. They just don't have the right contacts. And there's been a few deals that I really wish I could have done where they just passed me by. Whereas if someone like yourself, David, where you've done business with them already, heck, you have a better chance than me, frankly, of getting in. And by the way, just for the record, I do not have a financial interest in your firm. We're just friends. So as long as everybody's clear on that.
Yep.
So I think we've got a couple minutes left. Okay. And what I'd like to do is just give you an opportunity to perhaps add anything that you would like to say to the audience, anything that you would like to close with.
Sure. I think what's really important is this, and whether it's UCS advisors, another investor relations advisory company, whoever is running that company or even their employees, ask them if they've actually been involved in the cannabis sector themselves.
Yeah.
Ask them if they've ever opened up a business, because there's a lot of stuff that you got to read in between the lines. And it's interesting because you can read a pro forma, you can read a balance sheet, but how much electricity is this grow facility gonna use? What are the electricity? What's the power usage loss for that state? Is a license transferable if the company wants to try to get acquired? There's so many little facets that are just not put on paper. So we really pride ourselves with opening up several cannabis companies. We've been on the ground floor. We know what it takes. We've dealt with the states. We've dealt with the federal government on certain regulations as well, too, to go back and forth and talk about them. And that's really important, no matter who you use. And also, I encourage everyone, talk to your financial advisor, your financial planner. If they're telling you not to do anything in cannabis, you need to question them why. Because that's like them telling you, don't invest anything with the internet when the internet came out. And if we look at the numbers statistically, and as a medical guy, let's look at this purely objectively and not subjectively. And I'm going to dumb down the numbers. The only industry for the last 15 years in a row to increase its overall revenue on an average of 125% per year for the last 15 years in a row is cannabis. It's not real estate. It's not technology. It's not gold. It's not silver. It's been cannabis. So if you're not looking at this sector to invest and to do a little bit, you are truly missing out on this opportunity. And if you're someone who's scared, you don't really want to like jump into the water completely, you need some guidance, you can reach out to an investor relations advisor and they can help you with that. And they can help you make that decision. If you're going to maybe invest 150, 200 grand to a private deal, you might want to spend maybe $300 or $400 with a cannabis investor relations advisor that can go through the deal and tell you the pros and cons that can benefit you. Because at the end of the day, and people have seen me speak before, as a medical professional, it's about empowering people with information and knowledge. And part of our job here at UCS Advisors and every investor relations advisory company's job is to empower you, the investor, with information and knowledge. Ron and Brad, I think we're just about done with my time. John, thank you so much for hosting today. I really do appreciate it. And once again, everyone, good luck that's presenting today to the investor judges. And thank you so much for your time.
Well said. Thank you, Dr. Dave. I mean, that was really good. And I hope there's people out there can appreciate the opportunity that he's presenting. All right, let's move on. Our fourth speaker is Mr. David Frailer, Senior Managing Director. His topic, getting out of the weeds, leveraging star power, media assets, and strategic partnerships in cannabis. Mr. David Frailer is a Senior Managing Director at Gold Eagle Partners, a firm he founded in 2012 to advise life sciences companies. He soon took an interest in the then emerging cannabis sector and started advising cannabis companies in 2013. In 2014, he joined Cerna Inc., OTC SRNA is the symbol, as Chief Business Officer. After a year at Cerna, Mr. Frailer refounded Golden Eagle Partner to provide his knowledge to companies across the cannabis sector. Before Golden Eagle Partners, Mr. Frailer served at leading investment banking firms, including Pacific Growth Equities, Tireless and Company, and Headwaters MB. During his banking tenures, he has advised private and public biotechnology and medical device companies, helping to structure transactions, including IPOs, that's initial public offerings, public offerings, private offerings, mergers, acquisitions totaling over 500 million in value. And before investment banking, Mr. Frailer spent 15 years in senior operational roles for biotechnology companies, including research and development, business development, manufacturing, and program management. And by the way, here's my favorite part of his resume. In 1988, Mr. Frailer was one of the 5 Colorado players selected to play for the Denver Rifles in the American Lacrosse League, ALL, the first U.S. professional lacrosse league. Sorry, forgive me, Professional Field Lacrosse League. I played lacrosse in high school, and it was a lot of fun. I give you credit for that. Mr. Frailer parlays his athletic background and knowledge in cannabis to assist Athletes for Care, a not-for-profit created by athletes to address healthcare issues. They do good work. You should Google them. David received a BA degree from the University of Colorado, Boulder in biochemistry, a BA degree in molecular, cellular, and developmental biology, and an MBA from the Leeds School of Business at the University of Colorado, Boulder. He is also the listed inventor of free issued US patents, and now that's impressive. Mr. Trailer is a registered representative and has passed the FINRA Series 7, 63, and 66 examinations. And Mr. Trailer is registered in the following states: California, Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Illinois, Massachusetts, Nevada, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, Puerto Rico, Texas, and Washington. If I've missed anything or misstated anything, David, please correct it. And Mr. David Taylor, please take it away.
Hey, thank you, John. Really appreciate it. And actually, I think you just pretty much did the whole comment on everything. So we can just open it up for questions, John. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you
fair
for
enough, fair enough. If you have anything you want to say, just go ahead.
Thank you for the kind introduction, John. Thanks, Brad, for organizing this. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here with all these other panelists, esteemed panelists, and certainly thanks everybody for listening in. Really, I was talking to Brad. One of the topic that Brad had put out is talking about cannabis and registered FINRA broker dealers. And I thought that would probably be a topic that wouldn't be so interesting. But I think a couple topics maybe I'd like to do is some of the things we've learned, but starting off with maybe the evolution of what we've seen in finance, in cannabis, and maybe also thanks, John, for kind of setting the table on that. But adding a little more detail or color to some of that background, because it has been, frankly speaking, I think most people that are in the cannabis industry, like Dr. David, nice job, Dr. David, is finding out how people actually originally got into the industry and go from there. But I would like to take it way back, kind of, I think, in the beginning, and to what John had just indicated. Frankly, I think everybody on this listening in would say it's better to be lucky than good. And so, frankly, looking back on my career, I got pretty lucky with a lot of things, and certainly one of them was getting into cannabis when we did. So again, I'm Senior Managing Director, Golden Eagle Partners. We're an investment banking firm. We're the first investment banking firm to get into the industry in the US. I'm not so sure that's true for Canada, just because the FINRA requirements scared a number of people away. But before I got registered, as John had indicated, I did some work in leading biotech companies. And so I started off in some companies in Boulder. One thing too, I worked for 15 years for companies based in Boulder, Silicon Valley, and also Berlin, Germany. So there's an international component that I'd like to get to too, because we're based here in Denver, Colorado, but we do international work in the cannabis industry, and we have been doing international work for almost 5 years. But one of the things that was interesting, looking back in my career, is the first 4 years was spent doing recombinant protein production and process development, as John indicated. And luckily, through some of that work, I was awarded inventorship on 2 US patents. And one thing that we learned during that, and also subsequently at a company called Affymetrix, which was a leading genomics company in the mid-1995, 97, mid-90s, learned that biological supply chains are inherently unstable. And by that, I mean, for example, we would be scaling up from 500 liter to 1,000 liters. And all of a sudden we'd have this protein impurity come out of nowhere, and we'd have to find a way to get rid of it. And so as a result of that, when I got into cannabis, I thought it was very interesting, because you'd end up having a lot of these operators, whether they're LPs in Canada or MSOs in the US, going from 40,000 square feet of grow to 400,000 in one jump. And we understood right away that that was a disaster waiting to happen. And frankly, I think you've seen that writ pretty large with a lot of these MSOs in the US going for land grabs and grabbing a lot of cultivation operations. And everybody was thinking that growing weed's easy. And as everybody knows, the end of that story has been told, that growing weed's not easy, and scaling that rapidly is a disaster waiting to happen. You don't see Roche, Genentech, et cetera, do that. But so got into biotech. So that was a really interesting part too, because the one thing, a lesson that we've learned too, and this is kind of the topic of my discussion, is kind of lessons learned in cannabis over the last 7 or so years in finance. And one of them too is the fact that it's a very tough thing to be doing finance and doing cannabis at the same time, right? And that's one thing that Dr. Dave was talking about. He's right, it ain't right, because one thing that has been tough is the cannabis industry, even in spite of the growth that he referenced, it's been an undercapitalized industry, right? And part of that reason has been a number of things. But for example, when I was at Cerna, as John mentioned, I was chief business officer from 2014 to 2015. And that was really one of the first waves. I joined Cerna late in 2014. They went public in March of 2014. They were one of the first companies to be public, along with TerraTech. I think TerraTech was right in front of us. But it was interesting because when I was there, we had a hard time raising $3.5 million for Cerna, being a public company. And now you see, obviously, some of the companies, Curaleaf, raising 300 million these days. So at that early stage, it was really not easy. But also the thing that was interesting about it is that if you're in a cannabis company and if you're an OTC company, it was kind of a perfect storm, frankly. And we were a lightning rod for crap, to put it bluntly. Because OTC companies, a lot of people think that people working at OTC aren't smart. And a lot of people on this call will understand and appreciate the fact that a lot of people think if you work in cannabis, you're not that smart. And so we had numerous times where people would approach us. And so that's the other lesson learned that we've learned in cannabis, is you have to be very careful with people say that they have money, because if they do, most likely the time it's not real money, or they're going to move the goalposts on you, et cetera, right? So, but a corollary to that, being at Cerna, I think, as some of you guys may remember too, in March 2016, Mass Roots, another problem with the finance and the cannabis side is that, for example, NASDAQ is still a problem here in the US. As many know, Kronos is listed, the Canadian LP, on the NASDAQ because they're not nationally illegal here, they're in Canada, right? But as many of you may remember, Mass Roots, which is a social media company, wasn't even plan touching, tried to list on the NASDAQ in, I think it was May 2016. They were denied by NASDAQ. So, this kind of gets to the fact that a lot of people say, oh, well, cannabis is just like any other industry. And it's not. And especially if you want to talk, for example, whether we're talking marijuana or hemp, it's not the same, because, for example, here in Colorado, as many of you may have seen years ago, and it's still somewhat the case, is in a normal industry, if you have a surplus of some kind of product you make, you can certainly just ship it across the state line and sell it somewhere else. Well, here in Colorado, it's really interesting because you'd see a whipsaw in a lot of different, you'd see a whipsaw in the prices of marijuana here in Colorado, just because you'd see like online outdoor grow operations come online and then flood the market. And so that was still somewhat the case of seeing some really interesting supply and demand economics you don't see very often. And then, for example, with hemp, that's not the same either. So as many of you know, the Farm Bill passed in 2018, December 2018, to legalize hemp, right? And I guess it made it nationally legal, but it turns out one of our clients, Panacea Life Sciences, was based here, and many of you may remember this story. Just a month later, in January 2019, Panacea had ordered a load of hemp from Kentucky, and they're having it shipped to Colorado to process. And it turns out the guys driving the truck unfortunately ran a stoplight. Cops pulled him over in Oklahoma and thought that was the biggest drug bust they'd ever seen, right? And they were even talking about throwing the drivers in jail for for quite a while, right? Well, it turns out that that company didn't see that weed for over a year, for like 15 months did they get that. And I think that's an interesting lesson too, for people fast forward to now, that people are talking about the SAFE Act, making everything copacetic and descheduling or rescheduling marijuana down to a Schedule 3 or what have you. We firmly believe that even if that happens, they're going to screw it up, right? So take, for example, the 2018 Farm Bill. Even though they supposedly made hemp nationally legal, there's still people in Oklahoma, there's still people in other parts of the US that are not ascribing to that or didn't get the memo, frankly, right? And so then let's add that to marijuana, or if people want to call it cannabis. With a biological background, I look at cannabis as a genus. And so I consider both marijuana and hemp to be underneath cannabis. But that being said, if you look at the cannabis industry, it's interesting because it spans more governmental agencies than probably any other product or sector out there, right? You've got the IRS, you've got the FDA, the DEA, the Treasury, Fed, you name it, right? With all the money and et cetera, the USDA, right? If you're talking hemp. So if they're going to pass some laws, our expectation is they're going to screw it up, right? So even if they do roll back things, we're taking the 2018 Farm Bill as an example of the fact that it's not going to be black and white when things do roll back, and whether that's going to be this year, next year, what have you. For example, we were in a board meeting this week, and one of our clients was stating that their strategy this year was to go public, assuming that the government and the politicians got on the right board and approved that. And essentially, I piped up and essentially said, in any industry, whether it's cannabis or not, I don't think anybody would want to essentially define a strategy dependent on what they believe politicians are going to do. So that's a really interesting point that we wanted to bring up. But as far as the finance, and Brad has wanted me to talk some of this, is that it's been an interesting evolution over time. A couple more things I wanted to say, and I have about, I guess, 7 more minutes, is certainly the financial evolution is continuing to happen. Grassroots still can't list on the NASDAQ or anything. We're seeing more interest, especially internationally. We're seeing more interest in the marijuana sector due to the fact that they see things kind of thawing. They do see a light at the end of the tunnel. So the finance is changing. We were in Dubai in March 2018, ahead of the curve to reach out to, some Saudis and Emiratis about what they might be interested in medical. One person said, well, if I could do it without Sharia law, I'd put half of my portfolio into the sector. And a much older person said, medical cannabis, I don't care if it's medical marijuana, is definitely just a bridge too far. But what we found too is we reach out globally, as I mentioned, to investors. And it's interesting too, because one of the points I wanted to make on the finance side is that we reach out to a group out of Kazakhstan about 3 years ago. And they essentially said, there's no way in hell's or God's green earth that we're gonna invest in that sector. And sure enough, we call them 6-9 months later, and they've made 3 investments. So that's one of the other lessons learned in the cannabis sector over time, that we've realized that we need to have a CRM. Being investment bankers, the industry, as I mentioned, is undercapitalized. So we're always on the lookout for really good capital from around the world. And we found, being in cannabis, just because somebody says one thing one day doesn't mean you shouldn't talk to them about 6 months down the road and get a completely different answer, right? So that's happened numerous times. One other couple of points that I thought that would be interesting to make. So one of the things I don't think John mentioned is to get the Panacea transaction done in December 2019 as a $24 million tranche deal. And then actually just a year and a half before that, we helped PharmaCann, which was the Illinois MSO, raise $30 million before MedMen tried to buy them out. So we've been part of some of the biggest private placements in the industry, both marijuana and hemp. So we do both. We do plant touching, not plant touching. But we, after that transaction with Panacea, we were lucky enough to go and sponsor both events in Davos during the World Economic Forum in January 2020, right before the pandemic. And so, and one of our we got in front of a number of people, and the whole idea from my talk was to come up with a few ideas that we thought that we've learned in the US that might be applicable to, other countries as they're coming online. And a couple of things I thought were pertinent is one is that we've seen very little first mover advantage in the industry. And for example, Cerna, for those of you in the industry at the time, Cerna was the top company, or certainly one of the top companies in the industry. When we'd have a big event, and this is when, you'd have the MJ Biz Las Vegas event at the Rio, or you'd have the big NCIA event July of that year in Denver. Cerna always had, or usually had, the biggest booth on the floor. Well, Cerna's really nowhere to be found. They're still a public company. They still exist, but they're not where they were positioned in the industry. Dixie Elixir, as many of you know, they were a top company back in 2015, 2016. They're certainly not in the position on the pedestal they used to be. And then let's bring up MedMen, right? Just about 3-4 years ago, MedMen was one of the king leaders in the industry. And again, we had a conversation with somebody today, and it sounds like pretty much a lot of the assets MedMen is selling off because they've kind of frankly run that company into the ground. So that's I think an interesting lesson. Another one that we thought is applicable, and I think it's become true, is the fact that if you look at most of the geographies, and that's how we state it because we work internationally, but most of what we've seen, the state's rollouts or the rollout of a geography, a new country or new state, is never as fast, or rarely is as fast as people think it's going to be. For example, for us, our perspective, Colorado and rec, Nevada rec, Michigan, Oklahoma, those are good examples of pretty quick rollouts. But let's take Florida, let's take Massachusetts. Frankly, the California rollout was a shit show. And then you look at Portugal, Germany, UK, right? Spain. I mean, really, I don't think any of those countries had a rollout as quickly as they expected. And certainly Mexico is going to be coming around the corner. It'll be interesting to see. And I'm not saying it doesn't ever happen, but that's another point that we wanted to apply across. And I think that's putting this all in a nutshell. I just have a couple minutes left and maybe leave it to John for a few questions, but that's what's really been exciting for us, is having a background in biotech. Biotech's becoming a bigger part of this industry all the time. And now, as John mentioned, I've been a part of Athletes for Care for quite a while. If you don't know the group, you should, because it's a very great group, very solid. And if you've ever met a pro athlete, most of them are top-notch people. And I'm now chairman of the Scientific Advisory Council. So I'm putting together scientists from Uruguay, Spain, US, Israel, leading scientists from around the world, whether it's the endocannabinoid system or cannabis or even plant biology. There's a person we know that did some really interesting work using the Los Alamos supercomputers on cannabinoid molecules. So that's one last thing I wanted to end on. And John, if there's any questions, comments, I'd love to take them. Thank you.
Wow, lots of questions. And unfortunately, I have to wrap it up in the next minute or so. I just wanted to say that was an excellent walkthrough of the industry. And I find it ironic that if you're an American company, you have to list in Canada and then relist in the United States if you want to go anywhere. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, it's just absurd. And
that ain't right.
No, it definitely ain't right. And more importantly, I'm just imagining what it's going to be like when it's legal at the federal level, and finally everybody, all the mutual funds, all the pension funds, will not be precluded by the corporate governance from investing, and what that's going to mean. I mean, imagine CalPERS sits down and says, we'll put 0.74% of our assets into the cannabis sector. You're talking billions. So Fantastic. If I
Thanks,
guess if
John.
anyone wants to get a hold of you, they obviously know how to reach you. And if not, you could post your contact information in the chat. And I just want to thank you for a most fascinating and highly informative presentation, Mr. David Trailer. Thank you again.
Thanks, John.
Okay. Most welcome.
Thanks, everybody, for listening.
And now we're going to be moving on for our final speaker session today. And I would like to introduce Jeff and Cindy Ullman, co-founders of Good For. That's Good For, trademarked, one word. Their topic, how death almost killed one of us, yet we created a health, wealth, and entrepreneurs love story that's good for anybody in pain from anything. And I'm actually taking a very different approach here. I find that Jeff and Cindy to be very interesting and rather unique with skills and talents, just frankly not easily captured by their extremely impressive resumes. I mean, there's no question, for example, that they're both marketing whizzes, and I learn every time when I have a chat with Jeff. So I'm going to summarize by saying they really are out of the box thinkers. So instead of reading off their biographies, I will ask them to lead off by explaining why they are here and what do they offer. And I will yield the floor to Jeff or Cindy Ullman, but I understand that Cindy Ullman will be going first. So Cindy Ullman, please take it away.
Thank you. I'm so thankful for John's support and for all of you who are interested in what's good for you. And we truly have a love story because as long as I've known Jeff, we've worked together as a team, which is unusual for a husband and wife, I believe, to actually stay married, happily married and successful.
It's been almost 3 decades. We hope that doubles. So this is an unusual type of presentation because we're revealing both the outward side of our life through business and marketing, and some of the thinking, the internal non-shared with the public thinking and strategy and tactics, as well as our personal and highly emotional lives. But we're from California, and it's not so much the show business, but it's the business of show, you know, eye candy, where you live, how many nannies you have, how many cars, etc. But we both grew up in Los Angeles. And in my case, I led a very Forrest Gump type of life with celebrities and politicians and major events. Not that I caused any of that, but it was around it. I am a successful 4-time entrepreneur, but I'm also, and I put the word successful in quotes, 2-time entrepreneur, making a shitty mess of some things despite my best efforts. It's about timing in the world. But all successes and failures in breakthrough services, such as what Cindy and I have done together, including now, have always been directed towards helping people, in fact, enhancing millions of lives around the world, first starting in the United States, of course. Now, I've had a number of failures in a way, or at least admitting it, which is not very LA friendly or PC. But I've learned from my failures, and I know what I need help from, particularly from product entrepreneurs and operators, because I come from the service industry. Now, it was Cindy's imminent prognosis of what I call her death due date that really birthed Good For, because in March 2016, she was diagnosed with metastatic stage 4 breast cancer. 5 tumors had formed in her liver. 2 of them were about 75% of the length or width, if you will, of her liver. And she was given about 6 months to live between Halloween and Thanksgiving of 2016. So it was scary either way. And it was ironically not thankful for Thanksgiving. And so I asked Cindy, well, what do you want me to do? I asked her in front of the oncologist.
So let me interrupt.
Oh, please.
Jeffrey loves to help people. He loves to matchmake people. As you know, he was matchmaker. And a couples keeper, meaning we help more couples stay together than anyone else. And he really loves to match people together and help people. And what greater gift to me as his most beloved person is to put me in touch with what would be good for me and make me live a better life under the circumstances of a death toll. Like, come on.
Yes. Well, I said, Cindy, what do you want to do in front of the two oncologists? And she said, fuck cancer. And I said, yes, ma'am. Now, what we created in 6 days, and no, we didn't rest on the 7th, was a genetically personalized, what's called pharmacogenetic formula of cannabis. Now, that's not what we're ever selling because the FDA would close us down. So people can contact us and we'll send them information, but we sell nothing. There's not a dime that goes between us. But she was taking also her chemo drug. And we all know that chemotherapeutic drugs kill. They kill bad cells, they kill good cells. And part of the power of chemotherapy, as well as many, many, many pharmaceutical drugs of all kinds, have side effects, adverse effects. And hers was neuropathy, extensive, massive, immediate neuropathy.
And hair loss.
Yeah, well, she's got quite a head of lioness of hair. So we created, my son Elijah and I created a topical, because we've been home growing legally for many years, not commercially. So we created, but it was a high THC salve. It worked great. Friends knew about it. We gave it away, but then so many friends and family wanted it, we charged them. And I hated that.
And it really snowballed. It was a grassroots effect. I mean, call it guerrilla marketing, but we weren't trying to market it. It was truly grassroots with so many survivor, like thriver stories, people who thrive. And we were thinking to ourselves, wow, we did a YPO seminar on thrivers not that
Young
long ago.
Presidents Organization.
Yes. And so we thought, well, I want to be a thriver too. And we got to figure out this and help more people thrive.
That's right. So it was in 2018, I decided we just can't keep growing for all the other people. I mean, we're charitable and all. So let's create a company. So I had a few, as a serial entrepreneur, if you will, not quite so serial, as I knew that my focus had to be ensured by creating a brand name that was scalable across the globe, and also to create a product formulation strategy that could not be equaled easily. And so I chose the name Good For, but I also want to say that when business people vet their vendors, like in attorneys, like I did and like I'm going to tell you, how do you choose the right person? So I said to 3 different intellectual property firms, all at different times, all on the phone, could I get the name Good For? And they said, no, you can't, because good and for are too common in the English language. So I said, okay, I'm going to spell 3 words for you, and I want you to pronounce them. So here we go, and think of it yourself. MACDONALD. MACDONALD. McDonald. How about this? MCHENRY. Again, MCHENRY. McHenry. And the third one is MACHINE. What is it? If you said McKine, no, it's machine. So I want to know how vendors can keep me away, can give us quality, not just attorneys, but think outside of parallelograms, outside of globes, think differently, because that's the only way one can innovate and succeed in our international flat world. And we had to deliberately distinguish Good For from our competitive clutter. And we're succeeding in meeting our mission goals. And what fails or what plagues most startup, I'll share with you in a little bit. So Good For has been proving most enduring, and it's probably the most enduring and lucrative health and wealth enterprise, because we prove 3 things. Pain is evergreen, everywhere, and ever eluded by everyone, and nothing really works, whether it's a CBD topical really, and non-CBD, nothing works. That's why CBD pain topicals have such a bad rap. When you just have any kind of CBD and as the primary ingredient, not the active ingredient, it just doesn't work and it turns off people.
And as I got more involved with meeting more people who are suffering from pain due to their cancer-related treatments, we realized that's when we actually realized that we didn't have enough supply home growing it, that we needed to go into production and we needed to do it the
John, I believe they froze and dropped.
Yeah, that's the conclusion that I've also come up to as well. And I was just finding it was really interesting. I was just testing to see if my end, if there was any problems. But what we can do is we can wait for them to come back and hopefully they can log on because the story really is interesting. But in the interim, right, one of the things I would like to say is that we have a very engaged audience. We have a number of questions. I'll do my best if I can to answer some of those questions, but again, it's just the flow of conversation, and especially, with Jeff and Cindy. I mean, their story really is quite remarkable, and I didn't want to sort of hamper them by just asking, going through a Q&A. So I'm thinking that what we could do right now, while we're waiting for them to log on, is there anybody in the panel right now who has any comments that they would care to offer about what they've heard so far from Jeff and Cindy? Okay.
You just ask them to raise their virtual hand and we'll unmute them.
Okay. Wait, please raise your virtual hand. I'm actually looking for it, Ron. Where is it?
Caesar's waving his hand. Your virtual hand
is okay,
at the bottom of your
Cesar,
screen.
Go ahead, please, Cesar. Go ahead. Ask to unmute.
Unmute. Okay.
Perfect.
As I'm here for Respect Your Universe, but as a serial investor and entrepreneur in cannabis, and hearing about that you can't open up a company in the States, you have to go through Canada first. It's because of the government and regulations are more favorable. Is what is being done to lobby for better American government regulations?
Well, to be frank, Cesar, I don't believe I'm really qualified to answer that.
Well, on the panel.
Okay, fair enough. But I can tell you very quickly about Canada. Frankly, it's a lot more favorable because in Canada, bottom line, it's legal at the federal and provincial level. So that precludes a lot of problems. But I'm sure someone else, please pick it up from there. Wave a hand. Okay. Looking for those virtual hands.
Everybody, the raise hand function is at the bottom of your screen, or you can wave at the camera and I'll unmute.
Yeah, wave at the camera probably might be easier for now because I'm looking for that wave function. I mean, I'm just going to preface my remarks by saying, actually, is there somebody here that wants to comment? Cesar, okay, let's go back to you, Cesar, all right? Let's go back to you.
I think that was really more a question for David, and I just looked and he's probably stepped away. But as I think regulation opens in the United States, and especially with the federal government, then it'll be a lot easier. And in the meantime, I'm happy that Canada is the route back in.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had a friend that one time, he was from Canada, was in the States. He lived in Dallas, started a whole business, came to Canada to go to his mother's funeral. He couldn't get back in, so he went to Mexico and actually did what a lot of people are doing right now, and came back into the States.
Sounds great,
Before has
Cesar.
returned, John.
This is now, that's the cannabis route, Canada. Let's keep it that way.
Okay, and let's go back to Jeff, and let's ask to unmute Jeff. Jeff? Ask to unmute.
Not a fluffer, but thank you for filling in. You can hear us, Net, right? They're putting in, Verizon is putting in a new tower across the street. And boom.
Boom.
Thank you, Verizon.
Thank you for being patient with us.
Yes. So there's a lot we can share with you, and I don't know how many minutes we have, but we'll concentrate it. We believe very essentially that for a company to succeed in today's highly competitive, cluttered world, one must distinguish oneself with a name that's came out of our own fight, a scare of Cindy's impending and painful death, that we had to be memorable. And good for is part of everyday language, and it's expandable. The three least important words or letters for us are CBD. The reason being is we want to go to CPG, global, consumer products of all kinds, and you can put good for in front of just about anything, and it makes sense. We also have to respect our team members and give them, because they're the heroes in so many ways. I mean, everything doesn't come from us. And we also ask people, even what is it that I'm not aware of? And that's helped us in so many ways. We've also want to make a situation so that we can really exit from this business with no worries, that there's no skeletons in the closet. Legally, as Cindy said before, everything is done the right way, which is unfortunate because it's very expensive to do things the right way.
And it's doing good for the world. We really believe in helping others, considering how much it's helped everyone that we've come across that like what's good for them.
That's right. So I want to talk about some notable moments. The first notable moment that I remember is our stuff works. It really, really, really works. I think it was Sally Fields who said something like that, getting an Oscar.
Really, really love you.
And then the other thing is it's fun to create, but it's hard to evaluate. And it's required to celebrate successes and even little ones and demonstrate that metrics matter. Another notable moment was our first sale. Another one was when my brother complimented me. He told me that moment was not a discount. His wife bought our product. For time to, I say, crashing into rocks, she and family mountain bikes. For their money, what's called
Jeff.
Guarantee.
Jeff, you're breaking in. You're breaking up quite a bit. You might want to try to turn off your video and see if you can finish up the chat. It's pulling a lot right now, and everything's frozen. or they got booted again. Okay, John, we're gonna move on.
Yeah, I really wanted to hear their story, and I know that Brad is very good about these things, and we'll get another opportunity, I'm sure, in the near future. It's really a good story to hear. It's very touching. So, anyways, all right, everyone, that wraps up our speaker portion of the show today. I hope you enjoyed all these incredible speakers as much as I did.